Hello, and welcome to today's show, Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess, international leadership expert and trusted advisor. Welcome to Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'm delighted that you joined me today. I want to give a great big thank you and shout out to all of you listening today, all around the world. I'm delighted and so grateful that you joined me. I want to let you know that I've made a few changes to my show. The first change is that I want you to know a little bit more about me and that you can now find my podcasts under the heading of management on some of our listening platforms. That's right, management. So, if you're just finding me and tuning in for the very first time, I want you to know that I'm a leader and an entrepreneur. In fact, I have founded or co-founded not one, not two, but 3 successful businesses. Or maybe I should say 3 successful organizations, because 1 is a nonprofit and 2 are for-profit businesses. Yes, that's right. Now, before I became an entrepreneur, which was over 25 years ago now, I worked in corporate America for some really big companies like Xerox and Citibank. I also worked in higher education as an administrator and as a professor. As a matter of fact, I still do a little professing every now and then. I'm also a founding partner with the John Maxwell team, and I'm one of their faculty members as well, where I help all kinds of people leave their job, their job, and start their own business. I help speakers and coaches and trainers hone and polish their skills as well. So, if you're looking for a dynamic speaker to open or close an event, or if you need a caring and experienced coach or a trusted advisor or thought partner to help you with your business strategy or to develop the leaders in your organization, let's talk about how I can serve you and add value to you and your team. You can connect with me via LinkedIn or on Facebook. On LinkedIn, just look me up. I'm Dr. Gloria J. Burgess. Later in this show, I'll tell you how to easily find me on Facebook as well. Now, if you'd prefer to connect with me via email, use this email address. Just type in info, at gloriaburgess.com. All right? Great. So again, I'm delighted and so very grateful that you joined me today. I sure hope you're enjoying a fabulous day and that you're having a fantastic week. Because you know what? In the grand song of the universe, life is very, very short. It's short and sweet and very precious. So I hope you're making a difference in your own life. Because you know what? When you do, you also make a difference in someone else's life. Now, a lot of folks really want to make their life count for something, but they don't know how, or it just seems so big and overwhelming, they don't know how or where to begin. So they ask me, Dr. Gloria, how do you do that? How do you make your life count? Well, let me tell you, it's very simple, very, very simple. You make your life count day by day, step by step, smile by smile, every single day, 365, 24/7. You make your life count by making real connections with people. Now, don't get me wrong, social media is great for some things, but in your real everyday life, do you want followers or do you want to be connected with real people? Do you want air friends or do you want real friends you can actually talk with and be with? Can I just tell you something? When life throws you a curve, you want people who know you and love you. not just people who friend you and like you, right? I know you know what I'm talking about. I know that I'm talking to somebody out there, okay? Now, today I want to talk with you about leadership, about courageous leadership, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Specifically, we're going to focus on an approach to leadership, and this particular approach is called the Courage Way. The Courage Way, which is all about leading and living with integrity. And today's podcast focuses on a book that's called The Courage Way, Leading and Living with Integrity. How about that? The book was written by Shelly Francis, and she's joining me today as my very special guest. So, what exactly is the Courage Way? And what does it mean? And what does it take to lead and live with integrity? Well, Shelly will help us address those burning questions today. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Shelly is a person of influence, and she's quite inspiring. Shelly is a leader who makes a difference in her own life and in the lives of so many others throughout the world through her work with the Center for Courage and Renewal, a nonprofit organization based in Seattle, Washington. In fact, she wrote the book, The Courage Way, in her role as the center's Director of Marketing and Communication. Before coming to the center, Shelly directed trademarking and publicity for a multimedia publisher called Sounds True. She's worked in diverse sectors including business, high-tech, healthcare, government, and publishing. She's also owned 2 small businesses. Shelly says the common thread throughout her career is bringing to light the best-kept secrets while bringing people together to facilitate collective impact and good work. I just love that. Now, I first met Shelly in her role at the Center for Courage and Renewal. Years ago, I became familiar with the Center's work through my own work in leadership. And during the past dozen or so years, I was fortunate to become what I would call a friend of the Center. So, over the years, I've come to know a number of individuals there. When I heard about Shelly's book, I was absolutely delighted. And when I heard her speak about her book, she was positively on fire. So, to simply say that Shelly is interested in her work and book on leading and living with integrity would be an understatement. She is so passionate about her work, and I must say she is a woman with a mission. She's on purpose and on fire to change the world, and in particular to change the world for people who want to connect who they are with what they do. I think that includes most people on the planet. Now, when you hear her story, you will learn why Shelly is so passionate about making a difference, about changing and impacting the world in this way. I was struck by her passion. But this is just one of the many wonderful qualities that drew me, and I should say that draws so many people to Shelly and her work. Indeed, we are blessed to have her as one of our honored mentors on this show. She's an incredible leader, a writer, and storyteller, with a particular focus on serving other leaders. In many ways, in her outlook on life and in her work, Shelly pulls together the many threads of what my own life and work are all about. Now, you've heard me talk many, many times about these threads and themes on this show. The themes of gratitude, authenticity, generosity, courage, integrity, passion, presence, trustworthiness, hope, and possibility. I just love it. 2 women, Shelly and me, with very different backgrounds and experiences, and yet with so many common threads. Can I just tell you something? Shelly and I had a marvelous conversation. I'm so excited to have this amazing leader with us today. This is going to be a fabulous show. You don't want to miss a single minute of it. So, put on your walking shoes, grab your earbuds, or simply relax in your favorite chair. Grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea or a nice cool glass of water. We're going to have a great time. Before I jump into today's show, I want to take just a moment to welcome you. If you're just joining us, I'm your host, Dr. Gloria, and this is Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. I'd like to extend a special welcome to those of you who are joining my show for the very first time. You're in for a real treat. I'm excited to have you listening in today, and I'm deeply honored that you've allowed me to be part of your day so you can be inspired by the ideas and resources to make your life count. Today's program is all about courageous leadership. Specifically, it is about leading and living with integrity. Can you talk with us a little bit about, you've mentioned the term inner work several times, and can you talk to us about inner work and specifically the inner work of leadership?
Sure. I think as leaders, we're often stuck in our ego when we introduce each other. Here's who I am on my resume. Here's how smart I am from my intellect. Here's who I am on the outside. But as leaders, we don't often take time or feel that we can be vulnerable. I mean, I think it takes courage to be kind because people might think you're going to be weak. You risk being seen as weak. It takes courage to let people know the story behind your passion or why you went into your career as you did. So the inner work is looking beyond just your ego story and looking inside at your motivations and your values and even your biases and assumptions. And it's not all looking at just your inner strength. And, I think when people are looking for what kind of job they want or what career they want to move into, it's often based on identifying your gifts and your strengths, and that's really important. But it's also about acknowledging your shadows and your limits so that you can be honest and, more self-aware. So it takes inner work. It's not the external. It's looking inward, and that takes a lot of courage. And it takes community. It takes other people who are willing to go with you to that space.
And when you talk about community and people going with you to that space, I mean, I teach this way, so I know what you mean, but can you unpack that a little bit for our listeners? Like, what does that look like in real time?
Right. I thank you for reminding me because it is easy to use the code language rather than translate this into understandable stuff.
No problem. Yeah, thank you.
How can we have conversations where we share our true stories with each other? How can we ask each other questions that get to our deeper stories and even just take time to do that? So it goes back to the touchstones of creating the conditions where we can interact with each other in that way, or even just be aware that that's a possibility. So, for instance, when we're starting meetings at work, rather than just jumping straight into the agenda, you can take time to just check in with each other. And maybe not just check in with, I'm really busy today and I got so much to do. But if you can create an introductory prompt that takes people out of their everyday life. So here's one that we've used at the office sometimes is we'll say, as a way of checking in today, why don't you share something that you noticed on the way to work this morning? And people might say something like, well, I just saw Mount Rainier. It was visible today because it's a clear day, and I just noticed everybody commenting on, did you see the mountain this morning? I mean, that's a very Seattle thing. Or they might say, I saw a homeless person this morning that was begging, and it made me sad. Or they might say, I just noticed the birds were singing this morning. There's just something about bringing yourself to work, to a conversation, or just showing up differently that gives people a little bit of taste of your life or what you notice. It just is a way of getting to know each other a little more deeply as humans rather than just who we are in our roles at the office.
Mm-hmm. So it gets back to what you mentioned earlier, which is who are you, not just what do you do.
Right. And who are you on the inside? Or, what motivates you? What makes you happy? And where do you come from? And, getting to know each other beyond the surface, I think helps us connect and recognize what we have in common, but it also allows ourselves to give each other some grace when we're not having a great day. We have more compassion and empathy for each other.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that it also builds a stronger team. So when the going gets rough, you have each other's back. And, when the going is great, you can celebrate differently together.
Right, yeah. I think it's that sense of being in it together in a sense of shared mission that comes out of talking about what's important to you. And when you have rough times, I think you're more likely to trust that it's okay to talk about needing more help or acknowledging what's hard. And so you can get over those rough spots because you can trust each other. And trust takes time to build up. You just can't insist on it. You have to create the conditions for it.
Yeah, and it's a process. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And I want to ask you another question about leadership. It's kind of connected to what you just said, Shelly, but I know that the Center for Courage and Renewal uses leadership a little bit differently than we might often think about in our regular culture. And so can you just say a little bit more about leadership in that respect?
Yeah, we almost didn't want to start talking about leadership because there's a sense that to be a leader, you have to be at the top of the org chart or you have to be at the top of the hierarchy. And, leadership is not just at the top. Leadership can show up at any level of life and organization. We need people at all levels feeling like they can lead with integrity. Some of the things is leadership is keeping your values in sight regardless of the pressures around you. Or leadership can be listening well and inviting the opinions and answers from other people. It's encouraging other people to step into their leadership. So it's about, everybody has contributions to make and recognizing that we are all part of a bigger whole, that you lead from your perspectives. And if we have more people leading and feeling empowered to show up with their ideas and their best self, then we're going to have so much more lift and impact rather than waiting for one person to have all the answers.
All right, thank you. And that notion about leadership is still pretty countercultural. I've been teaching leadership now for 30-some years and really started to focus on the inner work of leaders about 25 years ago with intention. And it's gaining more traction, but it's still kind of a novel way to think about leadership. And you said that at the center you almost didn't use that language or go into that arena. Can you talk to us about why?
Sure, and I think it's because in trying to define the people that we've worked with over all these years and expand the number of people who need more courage in the world, we started with a program called The Courage to Teach, and it was for teachers and administrators who are just trying to stay connected to their passion for teaching, but also how can they bring themselves to renew education as a whole, or physicians and nurses. Not everybody recognizes themselves as a leader. So the courage to lead may sound like something, oh, that's for someone else. That's not for me. So there's a fine line between, are we serving people? We see leadership more as a verb, an action that you take rather than a position that you hold. But we also serve teachers and the medical community and nonprofit leaders, clergy and faith-based communities, reaching into the business world or government. I mean, there's so many professional sectors that can stay siloed or can stay like, oh, well, that's not just our audience. We're talking about collective courage and collective impact. And what everybody has in common is that they are leading in a new way. They're leading authentically, or it's transformational leadership, or they have tapped into their courage to lead. So leadership was also a way of trying to define what we have in common. And we couldn't come up with another word. So, yeah, I still don't know if leadership is the right word, but that's where we thought we would try it out loud. And so the subtitle of the book is Leading and Living with Integrity. And that turns it more into an action word rather than leadership, as this is only for leaders. It's about leadership.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. So I want to ask you, how, in your view, can people best use your book?
Well, I've had a lot of people since it came out tell me that this would be a great book to use for book groups or in discussions, because so much of what we do in retreats is we talk about reflection with other people. So if you have even one other person to go through the book with and have a chance to talk about what you're learning or practice with each other, we go into the touchstones, and then there's stories along the way in each chapter of real life leaders, the people that I've interviewed. That's one way to do it. And we are working on a reader's guide. We just haven't gotten it out yet. So stay tuned and stay patient about that. There is a website, courageway.org, where we've created an introductory email series. Right now there's about 8 emails that are spaced about a week apart that give a practice and a reflection that you can use as an ongoing activity to kind of start looking into these ideas some more.
Is that a resource that people can tap into, or do you have to have a special membership or something to gain access to that?
That is a free resource. It's an email series. So if you go to courageway.org, scroll down a little bit, there's a sign-up form, and you'll start receiving emails spaced out a few days apart. So free resource there. There will be some things you can download. There's the touchstones. You can get a printout of those. I think you can also use the book just in terms, I love to do this myself, is just open to any page and read a short section. There's a lot of really wonderful quotes in there that you can just take with you into your day, think about.
Okay. So lots of different ways to read it and to use it and to apply it, it sounds like, and to share it with other people. Yeah. I
think it's really meant to suggest some new ideas and suggest some practices that you can try out. You could buy a blank 3-ring binder or a spiral notebook and take some notes as you go, or just take notes in the margins.
Yeah.
Feel free to mark it up, make it messy, turn down the corners of the pages.
I love that. You probably are familiar with one of my favorite poets, Naomi Shihab Nye. Yeah, she talks about books that are well used, well loved, are marked up and dog-eared, and then we pass them on, right?
Yeah, exactly. I love buying used books and seeing all the underlines.
Yeah. Okay, so we're coming close to the end of our time together, and I just wonder, Shelly, are there any questions that you wished I had asked you that I didn't, that you'd like to maybe respond to, or any additional comments that you'd like to share with us about your book or your practice or about the Center for Courage and Renewal?
There's one other thing that I learned in writing the book that I have found really helpful to start thinking about how I build my own courage. And it comes from the idea that as I was interviewing people for the book, I started noticing, that we're so much in fight or flight mode as a society right now, that those are our go-tos. Those are our stress responses of fight or flight. And then I started digging into that more, and fight, flight, freeze. I was in New Zealand, and they said, well, we talk a lot about freeze as a stress response, like that deer caught in headlights. And then another leader that I interviewed, I was telling her this idea, and she's like, well, flock is another thing that researchers are starting to point out and notice as a stress response. And flock is that sense of us versus them, or the herd mentality, or even peer pressure. And so there's these 4, I think of them as the 4 corners that we go to when we're so stressed out. For me, I probably go to freeze or flee. My tendency isn't to fight, but for each of these stress responses, there's a positive aspect of it. So the importance of fighting for what you believe in, or fighting for what's right, speaking up, standing up for what you believe in, is a really positive version of the fight response. The flee response might be taking a time out or knowing when it's important to just walk away from a conflict and give yourself some space to breathe and take time out. Or flee a country. We see that with the refugee situation. That's a big one, but it's an important, taking charge of your life, or maybe in some cases it's because you have no other choice. Mm-hmm. Freeze might be taking a moment to pause or take a retreat or just stop for a minute rather than run away or rather than fight. And then flock goes back to the idea of community. How do you find your people who can be supportive of you? But what was so amazing is it's not just that there's these 4 options. There's always another option, and that's the word fortify. So how do you fortify yourself so that you can choose another response rather than just react out of stress? Mm. So, and fortify comes from the same word as fortitude, which is another word for courage. I'm like, oh, that's what we're doing here. These practices, these touchstones fortify us, and the community we build fortify us so that we can lead from the heart and not lead from our gut responses or only lead from our intellect and our head. Like fortifying ourselves lets us lead from the heart. And I think that's probably been one of my favorite things to just keep paying attention to and ask myself on a hard day is, how could I fortify myself right now? And sometimes it's just, well, then go to sleep or call somebody or go have fun. But I think that's one of my best takeaways is asking each other how we can find our fortitude and fortify each other and fortify ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and thank you for talking about those 4 zones that we typically go to, and also looking at the other side, the positives, and that we can choose. If we just stop long enough, and that's like a nanosecond usually, we can also choose fortitude. So, I was just looking at my notes. There's one question I didn't ask that I actually asked it, but I coupled it with another question, so I want to just make sure that if you want to say more about it, that you have time to do that. And that's the question about practices. I mean, you've touched on a lot of them. You talked about the 3 touchstones out of the many that are part of the Courage and Renewal work, and I've heard you name practices throughout the conversation. But for our listeners, are there some that you'd like to maybe really surface and underscore and amplify so that they can know what we're talking about when we say the word practice, because not everybody really understands that?
Sure. I think just the concept of practice at all is probably countercultural, or something that we don't always think about in terms of what's the thing that you do every day that connects you to your heart or connects you to what's important in your life. It doesn't matter what you do. I mean, for some people, practice might be that you go running every day, or some people might meditate and that's their practice. And so the touchstones is this collection of practices that you can do one at a time or all together. They are ways of being. I think of them as tools, or, if you think about a hammer, it can become an extension of yourself if you're a carpenter. It just becomes that thing you need to have to do your job. And for some people, it's their iPhone. Or their phones become an extension of themselves. You can almost hardly get through your day without it. But what if you had practices like turning to wonder that became an extension of yourself, that you could access or that were at your fingertips, that you could use as a tool to get you past a rough moment, or that could help you interact with somebody more authentically? I think these practices take practice, because you can't just read them and say, oh, now I know what to do. I mean, leadership is this daily practice, becoming a human. It takes practice to keep growing as a human. So it's really just the idea that it's not about practice makes perfect. It's just about recognizing that you can't just do this instantly. There's no quick fix. It's something that you can just build into how you want to, a way of life and a way in life, or a way of being. I think that's how I would describe practices.
Okay, thank you. I have many practices, but probably the one that's forefront in my life is a practice of gratitude. And I think about practice, in a fairly spiritual way, but also, just an everyday practical way. Most people understand that it takes practice to learn how to ride a bicycle, right? You don't just get on a bicycle, a two-wheeler, and not fall down. And so you have to take little steps, the tricycle, maybe for some of us, the training wheels, and it takes a long time to really work up the kind of mastery where you don't fall down on a two-wheeler. And the same thing with an everyday practice. It's not just something that you can do occasionally and have it become a way of being, but something that you do over time, gradually, incrementally, and over and over and over again, right? So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Shelly, are there any projects that you are working on or any places that you're taking the book that you'd like to share with our listeners so that they can learn more about your work and maybe follow you and just get more into the Courage Way?
Sure. Well, CourageWay.org has a variety of quote plates that people can click on. On social media, there's both the Center for Courage and Renewal. So on Facebook, it's Courage Renewal. On Twitter, it's Courage Renewal, as well as my tweet handle is Shelly L. Francis. We have facilitators all over the world, U.S., Canada, United Kingdom, Australasia. So there's people all over to connect with as well. So it's not just me as the author. I'm representing all of the facilitators in this movement. So check out the website, couragerenewal.org, if you want to look into finding a facilitator or retreats that you'd like to go get an in-person experience of this with. Okay.
Great, thank you. And are you doing any book events around the country or internationally that you'd like to share with our listeners as well?
No, I don't have any specifically on the schedule. I've done a few of those already. And so we're probably moving online until things sort of start lining up again. We're a nonprofit, so our budget is, my next work is to continue raising money so that we can keep spreading the word. Next year, I hope to go to Australia.
Yeah, good for you. And you've had an opportunity to talk about the book with Parker as well, right? Parker Palmer?
I have, and we actually have 2 webinars that we did when the book first launched that were a lot of fun to have those conversations, and those are accessible from the CourageWay.org website.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure that I'll give this information again on another part of the podcast so that people can find you and, not only find you but find resources about the book and about Courage and Renewal work. And thank you for saying that this is not just you, but you're representing the whole community of the Courage and Renewal community. So I think that's an important message to leave with our listeners. Well, thank you again, Shelly, for being my guest on this show. I can't wait to share your work more broadly with people, and this is certainly one of the ways to do that. So thank you.
I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. Fantastic nuggets. Thanks again to Shelly Francis for being my guest today. If you'd like to learn more about Shelly's book, which is called The Courage Way, Leading and Living with Integrity, check it out at courageway.org. That's courageway.org, courageway.org. You can also sign up for a free introductory email series about the book, and you can sign up for the series on the same site. Again, that's courageway.org. If you want to explore additional resources about Shelly's book or about the Center for Courage and Renewal, please go to this site. That's www.couragerenewal.org. www.couragerenewal.org. That's Courage Renewal, all smushed together. There's no and sign in it, okay? Or and word. Just Courage Renewal, CourageRenewal.org. And if you missed any part of this week's show about courageous leadership, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, or you can catch us on Alexa or right here on Talk Network Radio. Now, before I close today's show, I just want to give a shout out to all the folks listening all around the world. Let me tell you something. Now, more than ever, the world needs you. We need your voice. And I want to encourage you to bring it. Because if you don't, we will miss out on what you have to offer. We will miss out on your very special gifts that only you can bring and share with the world. You know, it's truly amazing how much impact one person can have when you lift your voice for what you care about, and especially when you do so with courage, with compassion, generosity, and integrity, and when you respect the birthright dignity of yourself and others. Now, I also want to encourage you to share the wealth. If you enjoy listening to my podcast, that's Legacy Living with Dr. Gloria Burgess, tell somebody. That's how you can help me pass it on. That's how we spread the love. That's how we can make a difference, one person at a time, one family at a time, one team at a time, one classroom at a time, inch by inch, mile by mile, and smile by smile, at home, at work, and in any area of our lives, every single day, 365, 24/7. Now remember this, how you live is how you show up. How you live is how you lead, right? And when we show up for ourselves and other people, that's called leadership. So remember this again, how you live is how you lead. Now, if you missed last week's show or any part of this week's show, you can listen to the recording at your convenience. You can even listen to it on the go. Check it out at iTunes, Audible, Alexa, SoundCloud, iHeart, TuneIn, Spreaker.com, Talk Network Radio, and so many other places. Or you can tune in right here at www.talknetworkradio.com/hosts/Legacy Living. That's talknetworkradio.com/hosts/Legacy Living. Okay? All right. Now, before I close today's show, I want to thank each of you for tuning in, for allowing me to share a bit about my journey with what legacy living is all about. Not just living and learning, but living and learning and serving so that you make a difference in your own life and in the lives of others. It's about being on purpose every single day, 365, 24/7. Legacy living is a powerful way to make your life count. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess. Please join me again next time, right here, for another segment of Legacy Living, Make Your Life Count. Don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Have a fantastic day, and remember, make the days in your life count. God bless you. That's our show today. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Burgess. I hope you'll join me again next time. Until then, don't just count the days in your life. Make the days in your life count. That's what legacy living is all about. Here's to you. Have a fantastic day, and be sure to make it a yes kind of day. Remember to celebrate the music, of your life. Make the days in your life count.